Most Klondike gold miners run one wash plant, maybe two in a strong season. Parker Schnabel runs 5 of them at once, across different cuts with different crews, processing gold 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, burning up to $250,000 every single day before he recovers a single ounce. He's 30 years old, and he pulls tens of millions out of the frozen Yukon ground every year. But here's the thing. Parker didn't start with any of this. He started on borrowed gear and salvaged parts, a used dozer, and a beat-up wash plant he bought off another crew's failure, running on ground he didn't even own, handing an ever-climbing royalty to his landlord. Then his equipment broke, and the lesson he learned 2 hours from the nearest town with no cell service shaped every machine he's commissioned since. So today, we're breaking down the secret $100 million fleet that turned a kid on rented equipment into the Klondike King. Every machine, every cost, and the one engineering decision that changed everything. And trust me, the deeper we go, the more insane the numbers get. Parker's impossible marvel of engineering. The Yukon mining season is ruthless. You get 120 days, but all it takes is one bad breakdown, one miscalculated stripping run, or one piece of equipment sitting idle, and the entire season is gone. Most miners simply accept that risk, but Parker Schnabel built a fleet specifically designed to eliminate it. He pulled this off not by being careful, but by being bigger than the problem. Right now, the standard Klondike miner runs one wash plant, maybe 2 during a strong season. Parker is running 5 of them across different cuts with different crews, all processing gold 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. The logistics alone would collapse most operations, yet Parker runs it like a factory floor. But the number isn't even the most impressive part. The support infrastructure looks less like mining equipment and more like a military forward operating base. He has industrial excavators ripping frozen permafrost, rock trucks hauling across ground that swallows normal vehicles whole, custom wash plants engineered specifically for Klondike conditions, specialized Miller welding rigs for field fabrication and emergency repairs on the spot. All of that costs money, a lot of it. Conservative estimates put the total investment closest to $100 million. Some of that is the fleet. Some are the land, the infrastructure, and the operational capacity built up season after season. We'll break all of it down. But first, to understand why a fleet this expensive was even necessary, you have to go back to where Parker started, because where he started looked nothing like this. The need for a better system. Parker Schnabel's first serious piece of mining equipment wasn't built for him. It wasn't new, and it wasn't even his. When Parker leased ground from Tony Beats at Scribner Creek for Season 4, he bought the Hoffman crew's leftover gear after their disastrous attempt at the Klondike. Among the things he bought were a used D10 dozer and a small second-hand wash plant that had already seen serious wear before Parker ever touched it. This was the Little Blue, and the 363 hopper feeder that fed it was equally rough. None of it was engineered for the volumes Parker needed. All of it was barely functional, with Little Blue processing maybe 100 yards an hour on a good day. That might sound impressive until you understand that Parker's current flagship plants are capable of at least 250 yards an hour. He was working at less than half the needed efficiency to justify his investment. Everything was riding on equipment he didn't design, on ground he didn't own. Yet on top of that, he was paying Tony Beats an ever-increasing royalty that started at 10% and climbed toward 25% as production naturally expanded. The more gold Parker found, the more Tony took. This happened even though Parker was absorbing every dollar of operational risk from diesel, wages, equipment failures, and bad weather, while Tony collected a percentage of gross output from a lawn chair. The deal was designed to favor the landlord. Most people in Parker's position would have tried to minimize production just to protect margins. Parker did the opposite. He pushed Little Blue as hard as it could go, and then it broke. He ran it past its rated capacity, pushing 100 yards an hour until the shaker drive shaft snapped. So he brought in Big Red, renting it from Fred Dodge, doing everything he could to keep the season alive. Lester that season, the D10 dozer cracked its ripper. No replacement was available in time, and Parker's solution was to bring in a water monitor, essentially a high-pressure cannon, to hydraulically break up frozen ground instead of ripping it mechanically. This was neither ideal nor efficient, but it worked well enough to finish the cut. This is the era that shaped everything about how Parker thinks about machinery now. When your equipment fails in the Yukon and you're 2 hours from the nearest town with no cell service, you either fix it yourself or lose the season. Parker learned that lesson on borrowed gear and salvaged parts. He built his entire philosophy around never being in that position again, and the next logical step was buying his own plant. He wouldn't be renting or borrowing, but owning. And when he finally had the money to do it, he didn't buy something small and safe. Rather, he commissioned something that would permanently change what his operation was capable of. The feats were nothing short of breathtaking. Sluicifer, the system that changed everything. Sluicifer is a custom-built, high-capacity wash plant engineered to Parker's specifications, capable of processing over 250 cubic yards of paydirt per hour. That number matters for multiple reasons, especially when we do the math and compare it against Little Blue's ceiling of around 100 yards per hour. Sluicifer represented a 150% increase in throughput in a single investment. As we'll see, the interesting design choices are what make it different. Sluicifer runs a massive feeder hopper that is much larger than standard plants and reduces the frequency of excavator feeding cycles. Every time an excavator has to wait for a hopper to clear, you're burning time and diesel without moving gold. The larger hopper keeps the excavator working for longer, uninterrupted runs. Less downtime in the feed cycle means more cubic yards processed per hour. And we're just getting started on the details. To tackle Dominion Creek's deep, untouched, and heavily clay-bound deposits, the spray bar system is aggressive by design. Given how clay doesn't just rinse off the gold-bearing gravel, Sluicifer's spray system breaks down those clay aggregates before the material hits the sluice runs, which dramatically improves fine gold recovery by over 25%. The industrial design also prioritizes uptime. It's important to understand that wash plants have components that require frequent stops for maintenance, such as bearings, screens, belts, and conveyor systems. They all need regular attention, and Sluicifer was engineered with accessibility in mind. It's built in a way that allows critical components to be serviced quickly without taking the machine offline for extended periods. In a 120-day season where every hour of downtime costs money, that design decision is worth more than any single mechanical upgrade. Yet it doesn't stop there. Since its introduction at Scribner Creek and later deployment at Dominion Creek, Sluicifer has been the backbone of Parker's record-breaking seasons. It's the plant that runs when conditions are at their worst, when the ground is nastiest, when the clay is thickest. That's why Parker deploys it as a replacement when other machines fail. During Season 16, when Bob's screen deck cracked mid-season and had to be pulled from the bridge cut, Sluicifer stepped in immediately, completing 35 hours of runtime in its replacement cycle without incident. Even for Tony Beats, the message from Parker was clear. When you need a machine that works when everything else stops, you reach for Sluicifer. The cost of a custom-built plant of this scale that is engineered to these specifications and capable of these throughput numbers easily runs into the millions in a few steps. Yet Parker commissioned it at a point in Season 7 when he had saved enough money from Scribner Creek. Back then, the cost was roughly $600,000 for the plant, but current builds of comparable capacity would run significantly higher. Even back then, this investment alone was the clearest signal yet that Parker wasn't optimizing a mining job, but was building a mining company that would potentially outclass anything Tony had going for him. The road to this point was a giant leap in technology, and if what you've seen feels impressive, prepare to get blown away. Parker Schnabel's tech evolution. Comparing where Parker started and where he operates now shows a very different category of machine entirely. In the salvage years at Scribner Creek, the excavators were old Caterpillar units with hours on them, pushing ground at whatever capacity they could manage. The D10 dozer that cracked its ripper in Season 4 was a blunt instrument, powerful enough for stripping, but not engineered for the precision that deep permafrost cutting requires. And though the rented Big Red was processing a much better 180 yards per hour, that quickly became the ceiling of his operation at that point. Now look at what Dominion Creek runs today. Parker's excavation fleet involves machines capable of ripping 40 feet of frozen overburden, the kind of ground that previous generations of Klondike miners couldn't economically touch because they didn't have equipment designed for it. The scale anchor of the current operation is Big Bob. Since coming online, Bob has contributed to a cumulative production approaching 84 million in gold recovered. It operates at the bridge cut, a location that requires constant coordination between excavation and processing crews to keep feed rates consistent. When Bob's screen deck cracked during season 16, the repair required sourcing a replacement part from Vancouver Island, a small region almost 2,000 miles away. Parker owns a Cessna 172 aircraft that employs a full-time pilot, Jack Frischkorn. Jack also operates an excavator when not in the air. Frischkorn flew to Whitehorse to retrieve the part, and Bob was back in operation within the same weekly cycle. The whole thing is a sight to behold. A private aircraft for parts runs. Field fabrication units from Miller Big Blue, 800 welders to the Trailblazer. 325 diesel rigs for on-site repair of components that would otherwise require shipping out and waiting weeks. When a wash plant feed chute collapsed mid-season, Parker's mechanics had it rebuilt and running within 48 hours. Yet it doesn't stop there. Let's briefly explore Roxanne, the workhorse, the plant that's been running longer than almost anything else in the fleet and still produces consistently. In one recent week at Pit 1, Roxanne put up 76 ounces of gold. And though it's not up to Sluicifer's numbers, it proved reliable and predictable, the kind of value that feels priceless when you're managing 5 plants across miles of active cuts. Big Red evolved as well. Originally, it was a 250,000 shaker plant built for Dave Tureen and the Hoffman operation. It was the machine Parker rented in his early seasons when Little Blue broke down. He eventually moved beyond it into his custom builds, but Big Red remained in the fleet because of one quality that expensive custom plants sometimes sacrifice. And that, dear viewer, is mobility. Big Red relocates fast, so fast that whenever Parker identifies a hot pay streak in a new cut, Big Red gets moved in while the larger plants keep running their established positions. During Season 16's most productive weeks, Big Red and Sluicifer together at the Golden Mile were consistently producing over 200 ounces per week combined. These numbers represent millions of gold gotten within a week. The Golden Goose was the newest addition at 1 million, and it brought Parker to a 5-plant configuration that has never had anything like it in Klondike history. But with 5 separate processing streams comes 5 expensive maintenance schedules and 5 potential failure points. It also means crews coordinating across miles of terrain with no cell service and communicating entirely by radio. The week the 5-plant system ran together procured a combined output of 548.55 ounces with massive returns of at least 2 million in 7 days. Yet, as impressive as that sounds, the money spent to make it work is a lot higher. So let's analyze the numbers and ask the big questions. What's the cost, and is it worth it? The daily cost of running the fleet. As we've said, none of this is cheap, and Parker has never pretended otherwise. Some say the numbers are insane, and a closer look might actually prove them right. First, running the full fleet at Dominion Creek burns between $100,000 and $250,000 each day when you account for diesel, wages, maintenance, parts, and capital costs. $250,000 burns to the ground each day for up to 120 days before Parker recovers a single ounce of gold. Diesel is the first number within the full set that staggers people. A single large excavator, for example, burns 500 to 1,000 in diesel each day. Run 3 or 4 excavators at the same time along with rock trucks hauling overburden across miles of haul roads as well as the generators and pumps feeding 5 wash plants. Add those numbers together and you're looking at a fuel bill alone that most small businesses couldn't cover in a month. And it all gets burned in a single day. Yet on paper, that isn't the number that hits the hardest. The biggest factor many don't see is equipment depreciation. It rarely makes the show but hits hardest on paper. A high-end excavator purchased for $800,000 can lose half its value in a single season of hard mining. A D10 dozer depreciates by at least $200,000 each just from standard wear, even under the best maintenance protocols. With that said, it's safe to say Parker's fleet, running at 24-hour capacity across a full 120-day season, is generating enormous depreciation on every machine simultaneously. That cost doesn't show up in the weekly weigh-in, but rears its head in the replacement cost when a machine reaches the end of life after just 3 years and needs to be swapped. Labor adds another substantial layer, as his facilities have at least 50 people working 2 12-hour shifts, with experienced operators reaching 34 per hour, and veterans logging 75-hour weeks. This generates a significant payroll that only gets bigger when we factor in housing. Parker runs a portable modular camp on site, giving workers 3 meals daily with pre-packed lunches delivered to equipment so operators don't have to stop working. This brings the true cost of labor running north of $6 million each year when you include only the most expected benefits and bonuses. Debt service on the Dominion Creek acquisition adds another fixed cost that doesn't pause for bad weather or broken equipment. The $15 million purchase was structured with roughly $5 million down and $10 million in seller financing over 3 years. This brings annual debt obligations around $3.3 to $3.5 million on top of every other operational expense. Parker keeps this in mind all the time when working on site, and there are seasons where he'd need to recover several $million in gold before his operation turns a single dollar of profit. That pressure is why Sluicifer's engineering matters so much. A lost day costs $250,000. A lost week costs almost $2 million. The higher numbers don't bring comfort, but urgency, naming each workday a financial emergency that needs to be pulled off with the best efficiency. Most mining teams operate 1 wash plant. Parker operates 5 and still has to keep up with all of this. So how does he do it without losing money? How 5 plants run at once. If you have a heart for mining gold and wish you were Parker Schnabel, this part might make you want to rethink that wish. The reasons are many. Managing 5 plants spread across miles of active mining goes far beyond the bounds of modern logistics. It's an engineering operation on its own level, with each plant running on its own cycle. We have the excavation crew feeding the hopper, rock trucks hauling overburden away from the cut, settling ponds, managing water discharge, and mechanics monitoring mechanical health in real time. 5 of those cycles run simultaneously, each with its own foreman and crew. They all report back to Parker with no cell service, relying only on the radio for communication. Every plant has a potential failure point. Every failure point is a clock ticking against debt. The coordination required is the kind of thing that takes years to build. Parker didn't arrive at 5 plants on day 1 of Dominion Creek, but started the season with 3 machines. These were the Big Red, Sluicifer, and the Big Bob. When production numbers came in below target, he added Roxanne. Yet that wasn't enough, leading to his acquisition of the Golden Goose. Each addition increased profits while also increasing the complexity by a huge margin. This is because opening new plants means more crew coordination, more maintenance cycles staggered across different machines, more parts inventory needed on site, and more daily fuel burns to track. The plant rotations within that system are driven by tactics to save money. For example, when Bob's screen deck failed, Sluicifer didn't just show up, but was only ready to deploy because Parker runs the fleet with contingency baked in. Sluicifer completed 35 hours of runtime in Bob's position before Bob was repaired and back online. Bob ran 37 hours before the failure, and all this info was gathered, almost like Parker and his team had anticipated the failure and extracted as many hours as needed before it fell apart. This level of attention to detail is what fans believe separates Parker's system from the gut feel mining that most Klondike operators still rely on. But this is where it gets interesting. The man who began this efficient approach wasn't Parker, but an advisor he hired years ago to establish the framework. He got to work immediately, studying time and motion studies, doing truck movement analysis, and doing the math of fuel consumption per cubic yard. Not only that, he studied other things like shift transition efficiency and advocated for better staff accountability. The result of his 2 years of study produced a huge gap in operational efficiency. The 15% increase in efficiency saved at least $37,000 each day and over $4.4 million each season. Because of this, the 5-plant system in Season 16 produced Parker's biggest amount of gold in a single season to that point. Roxanne's final run in Pit 1 added 76 ounces. Bob at the bridge cut added 120. Sluicifer and Big Red combined for over 236. The Golden Goose, in its first full operational cycle, contributed 177 ounces on its opening run alone. It was enough to make a significant dent in its $1 million acquisition cost in a single week. Total production through the season climbed past $29 million by the time the final weigh-in ran. Parker called it the most he had mined in a season. He also called it the greatest time in history to be mining gold. This now leads us to answer the final question about Sluicifer. Was it worth it? On paper, the math looks obvious. Parker paid $15 million for ground that holds at least $200 million in recoverable gold at conservative prices that potentially double at current market rates. He has a fleet capable of producing $2 million in a single week. The return on investment, stretched across the operational window of those water licenses, looks extraordinary. But debt doesn't care about potential. Each year, Parker owes at least $3 million in debt service on Dominion Creek. The $100,000 to $250,000 daily burn doesn't care that Bob needs a new screen deck and the part is 1,800 miles away. Every season where he takes on debt, the numbers remain fixed and the gold is variable. And the machines in between are the only thing controlling that equation. What Parker has built is a system specifically designed to remove as much variability from the gold side as possible. 5 plants running at the same time means one failure doesn't stop production. Field fabrication means a broken machine gets repaired in hours and not weeks. A parts aircraft means a missing component doesn't sit on a freight manifest for days. He also pays experienced mechanics who have seen every failure mode the Klondike throws at steel and iron. And he has a crew that chose his operation over Tony Beats because Parker's system runs smoother, not louder. From the data, we believe the real question isn't whether the ROI is there, because it clearly is. And if it weren't, Parker wouldn't keep expanding. The question is whether the margin between what the fleet produces and what the fleet costs is wide enough to survive the season that goes wrong, because that season always comes. So far, Parker's machines have made sure it hasn't come yet, and would continue to fight indefinitely to stop it. That wraps up the video, and now it's time to tell us what you think. Is Parker's more expensive model better than what he once had? Are the yearly debts and investments worth it? Drop your answers in the comments. And if you want more content that focuses on the real numbers behind the operations you watch on screen, like this video, subscribe to Global Status and check out the other videos on the channel. Until next time, take care.